At a time when Israel is killing Palestinians at unprecedented rates, at a time when Israel is bombing hospitals, ambulances, refugee camps, deliberately targeting journalists and their entire families, at a time when Israel has flattened most of Gaza, rendering it uninhabitable, there's a select group of individuals, we call them liberals, that aren't quite focused on that. They're more focused on making sure people don't call this genocide.
I think Israel's goal is to eliminate Hamas. I think they have the moral authority to do so. Unfortunately, there's a high cost right now of civilian casualties. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. I'm not sure there's any way to avoid that at the moment. No other fighting force in the world does what Israel does when it comes to warning people about imminent attacks.
This guy what's his name? Destiny, I think. Yeah, he's like some type of influencer, internet guy. He is one of the loudest of such liberals that really just don't like hearing the G word when we're talking about what Israel is doing right now. Destiny went on a Twitter storm the other day. We're going to read these tweets. We're going to see how he justifies this assertion. And yeah, that's today's video, and hope you enjoy. If Israel wanted to genocide Palestinians, then they would only exist in the history books. Okay, yeah, so we see what's going on there. So because Israel hasn't wiped all Palestinians off the face of the earth, then they have yet to commit a genocide. That's what's being expressed here, right? If you read the UN's definition of genocide, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. There's no requirement or stipulation for total annihilation. If that were the case, a lot of genocides, most genocides would not meet the definition. A notable one being the Holocaust. Yeah. The logic in this tweet implies that because some Jews survived the Holocaust, the Nazis must not have wanted it that bad, because if they had, they would have succeeded. Anybody else sense that? There's Hitler particles emanating from this tweet? Journalist Mehdi Hassan responded to that last tweet from Destiny, writing, "Per this argument, China isn't guilty of genocide in Xinjiang because the Uyghurs still exist. Same with Russia in Ukraine." And Destiny quote tweeted this, writing, "China is guilty of genocide because they are intentionally trying to eliminate a group of people, and it shows. There is no evidence of Israel doing this to Palestinians today. No evidence. Just, there's nothing." It's like, oh shoot, okay. It feels weird. Everyone's like really up in arms about what's going on. Are they just making it up? Oh, hold on, hold the fort. I just found something on my computer. It's an 84-page document submitted to the International Court of Justice that outlines in detail with citations the plethora of evidence of Israel's genocidal actions and intent. Chat, is this real? Is this a thing? Just to preface, this document and application is pretty unprecedented. The ICJ is the UN's highest court. It's the world court, basically. And after hearing South Africa's case against Israel, they ended up ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. They fell short of calling for a ceasefire, but they did order, with near unanimous approval, that Israel must halt any actions in Gaza that could constitute genocide, which, according to the ICJ, they are currently plausibly undertaking. There is no evidence that Israel has changed anything about their rhetoric or military strategy in the months since this ruling, so, by the court's logic, the final verdict should be obvious, but unfortunately, we likely won't see that conclusion for at least another few years, because we live in hell. Okay, enough yapping. We're starting on page 30, section C. Genocidal acts committed against the Palestinian people. This section provides an overview of the acts in which Israel is engaged that are genocidal in character, having regard to their nature, scope, and context. These acts are ongoing in a conflict context, where Israel is deliberately imposing telecommunications blackouts on Gaza, restricting access by fact-finding bodies and international media. Section 1 outlines the actions defined as killing Palestinians in Gaza. It goes over the death toll, which is actually out of date. Currently, it's sitting at 28,000, not 21,000. The percentage of women and children killed, which is 70. The 15,000 people that are reported missing, probably dead under the rubble. Palestinians have been killed in their homes, in shelters, in hospitals, in schools, churches, mosques, literally just trying to find food and water for their families. Killed while evacuating, killed in the zones by which they're supposed to be evacuated to. And by evacuate, that means displaced. It means kicked out, homes destroyed, can't come back. Multiple instances of Israeli soldiers performing summary execution. One account was of at least 11 members of the Anan family and their relatives, boys and men, said to have been separated out by Israeli shoulders and shot in front of their family, before the women and children were then attacked. Unarmed people, including Israeli hostages, being shot dead on sight, despite posing no threat, even while waving white flags.
When News at 10 first broadcast pictures of a Palestinian man in a group carrying a white flag in Gaza who was shot dead, the Israeli military told us it was not aware of the incident. It then said we had edited the pictures.
They knocked down the front wall and entered the house. We were sitting down having lunch at the time. Then my brother Mohammed was shot. He was at the front, waving a white flag.
For Palestinian children in particular, death is everywhere and nowhere is safe. A total of over 7,729 Palestinian children have been killed in Gaza to date. The scale of Palestinian child killings in Gaza is such that United Nations chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. Indeed, the unprecedented rate of Palestinian child casualties has prompted UNICEF's spokesperson to call Israel's attacks on Gaza a war on children. Doctors, journalists, teachers, academics, and other professionals are also being killed at wholly unprecedented rates. To date, Israel has killed over 311 doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers, including doctors and ambulance drivers killed on duty, 103 journalists, which is now closer to 120, amounting to over one per day, and over 73% of the total number of journalists and media workers killed globally in 2023, 40 civil defense workers responsible for helping to dig victims out of the rubble killed while on duty, and over 209 teachers and educational staff. 144 United Nations employees have also been killed, the highest number of aid workers killed in UN history in such a short time. In addition to being killed by Israeli weaponry, Palestinians in Gaza are also at immediate risk of death by starvation, dehydration, and disease as a result of the ongoing siege by Israel, the insufficient aid being allowed through to the Palestinian population, and the extreme difficulties in distributing such limited aid that is permitted to enter the territory due to the decimation of Gaza's infrastructure in Israel's military attacks. Israelis sitting in front of the aid trucks to block them from entering Gaza is also not helping. Surprise, surprise. Celebrating too. Laughing what happens. Absolutely fucking depraved.
Dozens of protesters have demonstrated outside a major Israeli seaport opposing the delivery of humanitarian aid.
Hey, we're going to take a break from this very upsetting material real quick to talk about today's quite relevant sponsor, Ground News. Seeing what's happening in Gaza play out on the news and on our social media feeds can be confusing. It's hard to know what information to trust when it's being thrown at us so often, usually without enough context. So I can't think of a more perfect sponsor for today's video than Ground News. Ground News app and website gathers related news articles on any topic from around the world in one place and shows me the source's political leaning, reliability, and ownership, so I can assess how different news outlets are framing this conflict. For example, when Israel airstruck Rafah, the supposed refugee camp in the south of Gaza, killing at least 67 Palestinians, I used Ground News to see how that story was covered. 472 news outlets reported on this, with a fairly equal amount of coverage coming from the left, center, and right-leaning sources, according to bias ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. And since there are so many misleading narratives out there, I filtered the articles by highest factuality, so I only see news from the most reliable outlets. Articles on the left seem to focus on how this attack is affecting Palestinian civilians, the ones being displaced into the only supposed place of refuge, only to be, bombed, airstruck. Center-rated sources gave the more detached details of just how these bombs were dropped on the refugee camp, and articles on the right tended to lead with this conflict's effect on Israelis and the Israeli hostages. Most people never read beyond article headlines, so the ability to compare the framing from hundreds of news outlets all at once with tools that help me surface the best information is a game changer. So go to ground.news/Noah to try Ground News for yourself. Plans start at $1 per month, but you can get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan by using my link. Ground News is supported by their subscribers and doing important work that no other news outlets are doing, so I encourage you to check them out. Alright, now let's get back to the video. Section number 2, which is about bodily and mental harm to Palestinians in Gaza. Mind you, this is 2 of 8, and yeah, we're going to go through them all because I feel like I haven't seen that done in any major Western media outlets or content. I'm sure it has been, but just in case, if you haven't seen it, we're doing it. 55,000 Palestinians have been wounded in Israel's military attacks since October 7th. The majority of them women and children. Burns and amputations are typical injuries. There's an estimated 1,000 children that have lost one or both legs. Reports of Israeli forces using white phosphorus in densely populated areas. Even small amounts of white phosphorus can cause deep and severe burns, penetrating through the bone and capable of reigniting after initial treatment. There are no functioning hospitals in the north of Gaza, soon to be none in the south as well. Of the 12 that existed, only 7 are operational, such that injured persons persons are reduced to waiting to die, unable to seek surgery or medical treatment beyond first aid, dying slow, agonizing deaths from their injuries or from resultant infections. The extreme levels of bombardment and lack of any safe areas are also causing severe mental trauma in the Palestinian population in Gaza. Even before the latest onslaught, Palestinians in Gaza suffered severe trauma from prior attacks. 80% of Palestinian children experienced higher levels of emotional distress, demonstrating bedwetting and reactive mutism, and engaging in self-harm and suicidal thoughts. 11 weeks of relentless bombardment, displacement, and loss will necessarily have led to a further increase in those figures, particularly for the estimated tens of thousands of Palestinian children who have lost at least one parent and those who are the sole surviving members of their families.
On the second floor, there's a 5-year-old boy who was hit by a grenade. A fragment passed through his eye and lodged in his brain. But that's just part of Mumin's story. His brother and sister watched it all.
It was lunchtime. We were sitting down.
11-year-old Ahmed Hattab was in the kitchen when Israeli soldiers broke into the family home.
They raided our house and they shot our mum and dad. Then they started shooting at us.
His sister, Buthaina, is 9.
We went to another room, hiding from the soldiers. They started banging on the door, and then they blew it up.
Point 53 gives examples of actions taken to intentionally cause psychological distress, specifically with regards to education and how the system is being completely disrupted by the bombing. It's even worse in reality than it looks. It's the amount of suffering is just something incomparable. It's really unbearable. I'm speechless when I try and think of the future of these children. It's generations of children who will be handicapped, who will be traumatized. The very children in our mental health programs are telling us that they would rather die than continue living in Gaza now. Large numbers of Palestinian civilians, including children, have reportedly been arrested, blindfolded, forced to undress and remain outside in the cold weather before being forced onto trucks and taken to unknown locations. Medics and first responders in particular have been repeatedly detained by Israeli forces, with many being detained incommunicado at unknown locations. Videos published by Israeli media on Christmas Day appear to show hundreds of Palestinians rounded up inside Al Yarmouk football stadium in Gaza City, including children, older people, and persons with disabilities being forced to strip to their underwear in degrading conditions. Many Palestinian detainees who have been released report having been subjected to torture and ill treatment, including the deprivation of food, water, shelter, and access to toilets. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports video footage showing bruises and burns on the bodies of detainees, images of mutilated and burned corpses alongside videos of armed attacks by Israeli soldiers filed as exclusive content from the Gaza Strip are reportedly circulated in Israel via a social media Telegram channel called 72 Versions Uncensored.
This is a picture of Palestinians praying for those who have been killed by Israel. In the accompanying post, the dead are compared to, quote, a large shipment of fresh baked goods straight from the shawarma. A comment reads, quote, I asked for a medium rare, make a new one. And then there's this, a dead body is being pulled by a vehicle across the sand. Kudos to our warriors who, despite the war, keep the beaches clean from unnecessary trash.
It is estimated that over 1.9 million Palestinians out of Gaza's population of 2.3 million people, approximately 85% of the population, have been forced from their homes. There's nowhere safe for them to flee. Those who cannot leave or refuse to be displaced have been killed or at extreme risk of being killed in their homes. Israel is repeatedly issuing evacuation orders demanding the Palestinian civilians in certain areas of Gaza leave their homes for other areas. The first such order, issued on the 13th of October in 2023, demanded that 1.1 million Palestinians living or otherwise present in the north of Gaza, including Gaza City, move to the south of Gaza within a 24-hour window. The International Committee of the Red Cross warned that the evacuation directive, impacting approximately 36% of Gaza's territory, combined with the complete siege of Gaza, was not compatible with international humanitarian law. The World Health Organization warned that it could be tantamount to a death sentence for hospital patients. The evacuation was, however, maintained and has been reissued on a number of occasions, including on the 28th of October 2023, ahead of the Israeli announcement of ground operations in northern Gaza, and again thereafter, shelling and bombardment along the evacuation routes and at the destinations of the evacuation routes, leaving quote-unquote evacuation maps that have no designated areas to which they'd need to evacuate.
We identified 208 of these craters in satellite imagery and drone footage. indicating 2,000-pound bombs posed a pervasive threat to civilians seeking safety across South Gaza.
Not to mention near total internet blackouts at the time, preventing most Gazans to even see these maps. Point number 4 is deprivation of access to adequate food and water to Palestinians in Gaza. It is now literally impossible to effectively deliver this humanitarian aid. The late December UN Security Council measures were bogus. They were not going to work. They were never going to work. The watered-down resolution fails to properly address the 4 elements identified by the United Nations Secretary General as necessary following effective aid capable of assisting Palestinians in Gaza. Shelves are empty, wallets are empty, stomachs are empty. There's just one bakery operating in the whole of Gaza. You may or maybe probably not have seen that statistic that 90% of the world's populations in extreme hunger and famine are located in Gaza right now. People in northern Gaza are eating grass to survive. They are drinking polluted water. The lack of water is severely impacting lactating women in particular, who, even if undertaking only a moderate amount of exercise, require a supply of 7.5 liters of water a day for drinking, sanitation, and hygiene to keep themselves and their babies healthy. Young mothers are unable to breastfeed for lack of proper nutrition arising from the food scarcity. They've been forced to use contaminated water to prepare formula where it is even available, risking disease in vulnerable babies. In parallel, the chronic unviability of formula is also risking the lives of newborn babies who are already reportedly dying from avoidable causes due to the absence of medical care, food, water, and adequate sanitation. The impacts of malnourishment on older children may also be particularly grave and long-lasting, preventing them from reaching their full potential in terms of physical growth, cognitive capacity, school performance, and productivity later in life. Experts are now predicting that more Palestinians in Gaza may die from starvation and disease than airstrikes, and yet Israel is intensifying its bombing campaign, precluding the effective delivery of humanitarian assistance to Palestinians. It is clear that Israel is, through its actions and policies in Gaza, deliberately inflicting on Palestinians conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction. Point 5 concerns the deprivation of access to adequate shelter, clothes, hygiene, and sanitation to Palestinians in Gaza. More descriptions and examples here of just a lack of basic necessities. Clothes, bedding, blankets, critical non-food items. Point 6 is the deprivation of adequate medical assistance to Palestinians in Gaza. Almost above all else, Israel's military assault on Gaza has been an attack on Gaza's medical healthcare system, indispensable to the life and survival of the Palestinians in Gaza. Israel has declared an unrelenting war on the health system in Gaza, as observed by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. In a statement issued on the 7th of December in 2023, the United Nations expert noted that the healthcare infrastructure in the Gaza Strip has been completely obliterated and that we bear witness to a shameful war on healthcare workers. She warned that we are in the darkest time for right to health in our lifetimes and that we have descended into depths from which we must quickly emerge. Since early December 2023, Israeli attacks on Palestinian hospitals have only increased. The Israeli army has continued to attack and besiege hospitals and healthcare centers to deprive them of electricity and fuel, crucial to maintain effective functioning and equipment, to obstruct them from receiving medical supplies, food, and water, to force their evacuations and closure, and effectively to destroy them. The north of Gaza, without any functioning hospital for a week, has only 4 severely challenged, partially functioning hospitals available now. There have now been more than 238 attacks on healthcare in Gaza, in which over 61 hospitals and other healthcare facilities have been damaged or destroyed. Do you remember when everyone was arguing about who launched the rocket that killed 300 people at Al Ali Hospital? So much time and media coverage dedicated to something that is literally 1/50th of the damage and destruction wrought by Israel against Gaza's healthcare system. It was all a distraction meant to get the conversation shifted over from literally everything is being destroyed and everyone is being killed to we need the New York Times to develop a 3D diagram and diagnose exactly what happened here and argue about this for 3 weeks while every single day a hospital is being destroyed, bombed or attacked or starved of resources. At least 570 Palestinians have been killed at hospitals and healthcare centers in Gaza, and further 746 have been injured. This includes patients and internally displaced Palestinians who vainly sought sanctuary on or near hospital grounds, killed by Israeli strikes or snipers. Palestinian mothers have been killed in maternity hospitals and Palestinian children in children's hospitals. Even those tending to and accounting the dead, like Saeed al-Shorbaji, director of Nasser's hospital mortuary, have themselves been killed. Some have even been victims of Israeli attacks multiple times over, like 12-year-old Dina Abu Massan, interviewed by UNICEF after losing her parents, 2 siblings, and her leg in an Israeli strike on her home. She was then killed herself when the Israeli army shelled the hospital where she was being treated. That shit, man. That shit. It is literally impossible to keep up and cover adequately the amount of destruction and murder that Israel is doing. It's impossible. And I don't know, man. I just don't know. Fucking Jesus Christ. Those wounded by Israel and Gaza are being deprived of life-saving medical care. Gaza's healthcare system, already crippled by years of blockade and prior attacks by Israel, is unable to cope with the sheer scale of the injuries, now at 55,243 injured, including at least 8,663 children. There are reports of severely injured patients walking for miles trying to find help. UNICEF highlighted the case of a boy from the north whose leg had been blown off in the violence, who had spent 3 or 4 days trying to reach the south, delayed by checkpoints. The smell of decomposition was clear, and that boy had shrapnel all over. Potentially he was blind and had burns to 50% of his body. I was forced to do dressing changes on massive wounds, excruciatingly painful wounds. There was a girl with just her whole body covered in shrapnel. She was 9. I ended up having to change and clean these wounds with no anesthetic and no analgesic. I managed to find some intravenous paracetamol to give her. Her dad was crying, I was crying, and the poor child was screaming. Similarly to famine, the possibility of disease killing more Palestinians than the bombardments is approaching. The final point in this section of the document concerns the destruction of Palestinian life in Gaza. In November, 21 members of United Nations working groups warning of a genocide in the making in Gaza observed that the level of destruction that had been by then taken place of housing units as well as hospitals, schools, mosques, bakeries, water pipes, sewage, and electricity networks threatens to make the continuation of Palestinian life in Gaza impossible. As they note, Israel has in its bombing campaign against Gaza used powerful weaponry with inherently indiscriminate impacts, resulting in a colossal death toll and the destruction of life-sustaining infrastructure. Israel has destroyed not only individual homes, houses, and whole apartment blocks, it has destroyed entire streets and entire neighborhoods. Shujaiya, a suburb of Gaza City, once home to approximately 110,000 Palestinians, appears to be now a vast wasteland, entirely flattened as far as the eye can see. Its shops, schools, vibrant marketplace, family homes, doctor clinics, historic streets, and in Uthman Mosque, and everything that once sustained Palestinian life there has been damaged or destroyed, along with so many of its people. Other areas in Gaza appear to have experienced a similar level of destruction, including Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Gaza Old City, Al-Ramal, and Nusayrat refugee camp in the south. Israel's targeted the Palace of Justice, the main Palestinian court building in Gaza, housing the Palestinian Supreme Court, as well as an archive of court records and other historical files. Israel has also significantly damaged the Palestinian Legislative Council complex. It has targeted Gaza City's Central Archive building, containing thousands of historical documents and national records dating back over 100 years, forming an essential archive of Palestinian history, as well as more modern records of Gaza City's urban development. Israel has left Gaza City's main public library in ruins. It has also damaged or destroyed countless bookshops, publishing houses, libraries, and hundreds of educational facilities. Israel has targeted every one of Gaza's 4 universities, including the Islamic University of Gaza, the oldest higher education institution in the territory, which has trained generations of doctors, engineers, amongst others, destroying campuses for the education of future generations of Palestinians in Gaza. Alongside many others, Israel has killed leading Palestinian academics, including Professor Soufiane Taye, the president of the Islamic University, an award-winning physicist and UNESCO chair of astronomy, astrophysics, and space sciences in Palestine, who died alongside his family in an airstrike. Dr. Ahmed Hamdi Abu Absa, dean of the software engineering department in the University of Palestine, reportedly shot dead by Israeli soldiers as he walked away, having been released from 3 days of enforced disappearance. Professor Mohammed Aid Shabir, professor of immunology and virology and former president of the Islamic University of Gaza. The airstrike on his home killed him, his wife, their daughter-in-law, and their eldest son. Those who survived the bombing and tried to walk to Al-Shifa Hospital nearby were shot dead by Israeli forces besieging the hospital. Professor Rifat Al-Arir, poet and professor of comparative literature and creative writing at the Islamic University of Gaza, Professor Al-Arir was a co-founder of We Are Not Numbers, a Palestinian youth project seeking to tell the stories behind otherwise impersonal accounts of Palestinians and Palestinian deaths in the news.
For more than 16 years, Al-Arir worked as a professor of English literature at the Islamic University of Gaza, where he taught Shakespeare and other subjects. Rifat Al-Arir was a father of 6 and a mentor to many young Palestinian writers and journalists. He authored dozens of stories and poems about life under Israeli occupation in Gaza.
Israel has damaged and destroyed numerous centers of Palestinian learning and culture, including the Al-Zafar Damari Mosque and Center for Manuscripts and Ancient Documents, the Orthodox Cultural Center, the Al-Qarara Cultural Museum, the Gaza Center for Culture and Arts, the Arab Social Cultural Center, the Hakawi Society for Culture and Arts, and the Rafah Museum, Gaza's newly opened museum of Palestinian heritage, housing hundreds of cultural and archaeological artifacts. Israel's attacks have destroyed Gaza's ancient history. 8 sites have been damaged or destroyed, including the ancient port of Gaza, known as Anthedon Harbor or Al-Balakia, the archaeological site of a 2,000-year-old Roman cemetery listed on both the Islamic Heritage List and tentative UNESCO World Heritage List. Israel has also destroyed Gaza City's old city, including its 146-year-old historic houses, mosques, churches, markets, and schools. It has also destroyed more recent history of more hopeful times, including the Rashad al-Shawa Cultural Center, site of the historic meeting between United States President Bill Clinton and Palestinian President Yasser Arafat 25 years ago, and an important cultural hub for Palestinians in Gaza with its theater, library, and event space. And Israel is destroying Gaza's future academic and cultural potential. Alongside the 352 Palestinian schools it has damaged or destroyed, the 4,037 students and 209 teachers and educational staff it has killed, alongside the other 7,259 students and 619 teachers it has injured. Israel has damaged or destroyed an estimated 318 Muslim and Christian religious sites, demolishing the places where Palestinians have worshipped for generations. These include the Great Omari Mosque, originally a 5th century Byzantine church, an iconic landmark of Gaza's history, architecture, and cultural heritage, and a place of worship by Christians and Muslims for over 1,000 years. Israeli shelling has also damaged the Church of St. Porphyrius, founded in 425 AD and believed to be the 3rd oldest church in the world, alongside 2 other churches that have sustained direct Israeli fire. Gaza's Christians themselves have been targeted and killed by Israel in the very church compounds where they sought shelter. Many of these war crimes are being filmed by Israeli occupation forces and posted on social media for entertainment content.
This is a how-to video on how to blow up a mosque in Gaza. Format is internet fluent. The content is very real. Filmed, edited, and posted on Instagram by an Israeli soldier. It's one of dozens reviewed by CNN.
Friend of the show, Ugopnik, had a great video on this topic specifically. You should go watch that. Israel has killed and is killing Palestinian storytellers and poets, Palestinian farmers and fishermen, alongside Gaza's local legends. Pastry chef Masoud Muhammad al-Qahtadi, killed in an Israeli airstrike on his house on the 3rd of November 2023, whose shop's motto, "Let the poor eat," and reputation for giving away the popular Palestinian treat kanafa to indigent customers, earned him the nickname Father of the Poor. 84-year-old Elham Farah, from one of Palestine's oldest Christian families, a reputed accorditionist and music teacher known as Mother Orange to generations of Palestinian music students for her shock of red hair, shot dead by an Israeli sniper outside the Holy Family Church in Gaza City when she returned home for warm clothes and was left to bleed to death. And Al-Shaima Saidam, the student with the highest final high school exam grades in the whole of Palestine, killed with multiple members of her family in a strike on Al-Nusrat refugee camp. Just as Israel is destroying the official memory and records of Palestinians in Gaza through its destruction of Gaza's archives and landmarks, it is obliterating Palestinian personal lives and private memories, histories, and futures through bombing and bulldozing graveyards, destroying family records and photographs, wiping out entire multi-generational families, and killing, maiming, and traumatizing a generation of children. As a Palestinian man in a video by UNRWA succinctly sums up, "These are all our memories, our entire lives. Now it's all gone. Everything has turned to ashes." The Israeli army erecting the Israeli flag over the wreckage of devastated Palestinian homes, towns, and cities, including in Gaza City's Palestine Square itself, and spurred on by calls from within the Israeli government and without to flatten Gaza and re-establish Israeli settlements on the rubble of Palestinian homes, is destroying the very fabric and basis of Palestinian life in Gaza. Israel is thereby deliberately inflicting on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life calculated to bring about its destruction. Yeah, I don't have much else to add to that. The final point, point 8, is imposing measures intended to prevent Palestinian births. As set out above, Israel's actions are impacting Palestinian women and children in Gaza especially severely, with 70% of those killed estimated to be women and children. 2 mothers are estimated to be killed every hour in Gaza. Over 7,729 children were estimated to have been killed by December 11th alone, and at least 4,700 other women and children are reported missing, believed to be buried under the rubble. There are multiple eyewitness accounts of pregnant women being killed by Israeli soldiers, including while trying to access healthcare. Pregnant women and children, including newborn babies, are also particularly impacted by displacement, lack of access to food and water, shelter, clothes, hygiene and sanitation, and lack of access to health services. These effects are severe and significant. An estimated 5,500 of approximately 52,000 pregnant Palestinian women in Gaza giving birth each month are doing so in unsafe conditions, often with no clean water, much less medical assistance, in shelters, in their homes, in the streets, amid rubble, or in overwhelmed healthcare facilities, where sanitation is worsening and the risk of infection and medical complications is on the rise. Where they are able to get a functioning hospital, pregnant women are having to undergo cesarean sections without anesthetic. Given the lack of access to critical medical supplies, including blood, doctors are being compelled to perform ordinarily unnecessary hysterectomies on young women in an attempt to save their lives, leaving them unable to have more children. The Minister of Health for the State of Palestine, Dr. May Al-Kaila, confirms that the only option facing Palestinian women in Gaza who bleed out after giving birth is to undergo a hysterectomy in order for their lives to be saved. Premature births have reportedly increased between 25 and 30% as stressed and traumatized pregnant women face a myriad of challenges, including being compelled to walk long distances in search of safety, attempting to escape from bombs, and being crowded into shelters and often squalid conditions. Particularly in northern Gaza, cases of placenta abruption, a serious condition that occurs to pregnant women during childbirth, which is potentially life-threatening to both mother and baby, have more than doubled. An ever-increasing number of Palestinian babies in Gaza are reportedly dying from entirely preventable causes brought about by Israel's actions. Newborns up to 3 months old are dying of diarrhea, hypothermia, and other preventable diseases without essential equipment and medical support. Premature and underweight babies have little to no chance of survival. Palestinian newborn babies have died due to the lack of fuel to supply hospital generators. Others have been found decomposing in their hospital cots, medical staff taking care of them having been forced by Israel to evacuate. On November 3rd, the World Health Organization warned that maternal deaths are expected to increase given the lack of access to adequate care, with deadly consequences on reproductive health, including a rise in stress-induced miscarriages, stillbirths, and premature births. The reproductive violence inflicted by Israel on Palestinian women, newborn babies, infants, and children could be qualified as acts of genocide under Article 2 of the Convention of Prevention of Genocide, including imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group. She stressed that states must prevent and punish such acts in accordance with their responsibilities under the Genocide Convention. So if after hearing all of that, you still don't think there's any evidence of Israel conducting a genocide, I just want to ask how? How and why? I mean, his tweet did say intentional, Maybe all this stuff was on accident. Wait a minute, hold on, there's another section here. Expressions of genocidal intent against the Palestinian people by Israeli state officials and others. Evidence of Israeli state officials' specific intent to commit and persist in committing genocidal acts or to fail to prevent them has been significant and overt since October 2023. Those statements of intent, when combined with the level of killing, maiming, displacement, and destruction on the ground, together with the siege, evidence an unfolding and continuing genocide. This part of the document contains statements from basically every single person that works for the Israeli government that are genocidal in nature, if not overtly genocidal. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, notoriously described their military campaign as a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. Later on, in a letter to Israeli soldiers that was also posted on Twitter, Netanyahu said that this is the war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. We will not let up on our mission until the light overcomes the darkness. The good will defeat the extreme evil that threatens us and the entire world. Later, we're facing monsters who murdered children in front of their parents. This is a battle not only of Israel against these barbarians, it's a battle of civilization against barbarism. In late October, Israeli forces were preparing their land invasion of Gaza, and the prime minister invoked the biblical story of the total destruction of Amalek by the Israelites, stating, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our holy Bible," and we do remember. The prime minister referred again to Amalek in the letter sent on the 3rd of November to Israeli soldiers and officers. The relevant biblical passage reads as follows: "Now go, attack Amalek, and prescribe all that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep, camels and asses." I wonder what that means. What could that mean? Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true, and we will fight until we break their backbone. He's also one of the many Israelis to have handwritten messages on bombs to be dropped on Gaza. The Minister of Defense said that they were imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. He also informed troops on the border that he had released all the restraints, saying that Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week, it will take weeks or even months. We will reach all places. He further announced that Israel was moving to a full-scale response and that he had removed every restriction on Israeli forces. When we say that Hamas should be destroyed, it also means those who celebrate, those who support, and those who hand out candy, they're all terrorists and they should also be destroyed. That was the Israeli Minister for National Security. All the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world. No electrical switch will be turned on, no water hydrant will be opened, and no fuel truck will enter until the Israeli abductees are returned home. Humanitarianism for humanitarianism, and no one will preach us morality. This is the continued logic to justify war crimes, right? Taking civilian hostages is a war crime. Does that mean you can do war crimes to undo that? No. That's literally that. No, you can't. And what's being described there is a war crime, and they're doing it. They're doing that, and it's a war crime. We need to deal a blow that hasn't been seen in 50 years and take down Gaza. That was the Israeli Minister of Finance. The north of the Gaza Strip, more beautiful than ever. Everything is blown up and flattened, simply a pleasure for the eyes. We must talk about the day after. In my mind, we will hand over lots to all those who fought for Gaza over the years and to those evicted from Gush Katif, which is a former Israeli settlement. He later argued against humanitarian aid. We wouldn't hand the Nazis humanitarian aid, and there is no such thing as uninvolved civilians in Gaza. He also posited a nuclear attack on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Minister of Agriculture invoked the Nakba, said they were doing it again for Gaza. We all have one common goal: erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. That was the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset and member of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. It's not just politicians, though. Of course, it's also military officials. Hamas became ISIS, and the citizens of Gaza are celebrating instead of being horrified. Human animals are dealt with accordingly. Israel has imposed a total blockade on Gaza. No electricity, no water, just damage. You wanted hell, you will get hell. That was the Israeli Army Coordinator of Government Activities in the territories. We cut the supply of energy, water, and diesel to the Strip, but it's not enough. In order to make the siege effective, we have to prevent others from giving assistance to Gaza. The people should be told that they have two choices: to stay and to starve, or to leave. If Egypt and other countries prefer that these people will perish in Gaza, this is their choice. When you are at war with another country, you don't feed them, you don't provide them with electricity or gas or water or anything else. A country can be attacked in a much broader way to bring the country to the brink of dysfunction. This is the necessary outcome of events in Gaza. Israel has no interest in the Gaza Strip being rehabilitated, and this is an important point that needs to be made clear to the Americans. If we ever want to see the hostages alive, the only way is to create a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He called for the destructions of water treatment plants. Much like President Herzog, this guy has repeatedly underscored that there should be no distinction between Hamas combatants and Palestinian civilians. Who are the poor women of Gaza? They are all the mothers, sisters, or wives of Hamas murderers. On the one hand, they are part of the infrastructure that supports the organization, and on the other hand, if they experience a humanitarian disaster, then it can be assumed that some of the Hamas fighters and the more junior commanders will begin to understand that the war is futile. These kind of statements are, not only evil and genocidal, but they're also just wrong. Hamas is not going to be eliminated. That's just not going to happen. That's not how this works. It's been 4 straight months of relentless bombardment in northern Gaza. Israel claimed that Hamas had been dismantled there and pulled troops, but they have continually resurfaced. The last thing I want to read here is a quote-unquote motivational speech that an Israeli army reservist made that's just, I don't know, it's just fucking sickening. Be triumphant and finish them off, and don't leave anyone behind. Erase the memory of them. Erase them, their families, mothers, and children. These animals can no longer live. Every Jew with a weapon should go out and kill them. If you have an Arab neighbor, don't wait. Go to his home and shoot him. We want to invade, not like before. We want to enter and destroy what's in front of us, and destroy houses, then destroy the one after it. With all of our forces, complete destruction, enter and destroy. As you can see, we will witness things we've never dreamed of. Let them drop bombs on them and erase them. This guy was called up by the army to give motivational speeches. This was broadcast on social media. It's just incomprehensible that it's just that mask off, It actually really isn't, though, when you understand how Israeli soldiers and settlers talk about Palestinians and the sorts of evils they've afflicted upon them in the past and will continue to do so in the future.
זה היה משהו זוועתי, וזה אסור לספר, אני לא אדבר על זה, כי זה יכול להיות סקנדל שלם מהעניין הזה. 3-4 חודשים הראשונים הייתי רוצח.
מה זה אומר?
אני לא לקחתי שבויים. בזמן קרב, אם מישהו ירים ידיים, משהו כזה. לא לקחתי שבויים. אם היה עומדת כיתה של
זה עם ידיים למעלה, אז באותו יום הייתי רואה אותי, הייתי קוצר את כולם, עד כדי כך.
כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה?
לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים. ותראה, יריתי, נלחמתי כולם. אני לא יכול לספור.
This list goes on and on and on, and I hope by now at least some of you are able to look at this and say, you know, maybe there's some evidence in there. I don't know what better evidence you can have of genocidal intent than looking into the camera and saying, I want to do a genocide. We want to do a genocide. We want to kill everybody. We want to do it right now as soon as we can. And then immediately taking actions over and over and over again that are meant to achieve that goal. How much fucking clearer does it get, man? We're going to return now to a few more of Destiny's tweets because, you know, that's the point of this video, to look at an influencer's tweets and call him dumb, not use drama farming as a Trojan horse to read the ICJ application that lays out a pretty compelling case that Israel is committing genocide. That's not the point of this video. We're here to farm. Omar Badar is another person who responded to that initial tweet from Destiny. He wrote, your obsession with litigating the applicability of the word genocide here without adequate legal background is getting in the way of a bigger point. Genocide or not, there is no dispute that Israel is committing horrific war crimes in its deliberate war on Palestinian civilians. Destiny responded, writing, I mean, it's possible that the IDF is, but the other side is committing a fuck ton of war crimes for sure. It's possible? It's possible? Aside from the fucking CEO of the Israeli War Crimes Institute for Defending War Crimes College, Destiny is the only guy casting doubt on the assertion that Israel is committing war crimes. They're on video. When it comes to Hamas's war crimes, it's for sure. He's very sure about that. When it comes to Israel's, maybe. I don't know. Who's to say? Who's to say? The other absurd part about this tweet is him saying that no one cares about holding Hamas responsible. My brother in Christ, what do you think Israel thinks it's doing? Literally, the only reason this genocide is still going on is because Israel is saying that they are, quote unquote, large quotes, holding Hamas responsible. Also, you know, the United States, virtually every Western media apparatus. That's why every major interview has to start off with 12 minutes of the host telling the guests to condemn Hamas, condemn Hamas, condemn Hamas. Come on, do you condemn Hamas? Another person responded to that tweet writing, since when does death toll in an active war not count? Destiny replied saying, question mark, question mark, question mark. Going to war is not genocide. People die in war, that doesn't make it genocide. Civilians die in war, that doesn't make it genocide. Even if you commit war crimes and target civilians, that's not genocide. So here's just sort of milking the one thing he's been technically correct on, which is that death tolls alone are not the same thing as genocide. They're not, but also no qualified commentator in this discussion is saying that. I personally don't consider a random 700-follower Twitter user to be a qualified commentator, but that's just me personally, I guess. He likes to do this thing. He does a few other tweets. Somebody wrote, paraphrasing him, if you commit war crimes and target civilians, that's not genocide. Lamau. He responded writing, how fucking stupid are people? Hey, come on, man. Relax. Jesus. Yes, why would you think you're making a point here? What do you even think genocide is? Just killing civilians? Once again, the original statement taken on its own as a tweet is technically incorrect. You know, war crimes and civilian targeting are usually are a part of genocide. Actually using the term requires other factors. But also, he here took an incomplete version of this person's argument. A minute after that first tweet, they replied to their own tweet writing, there's actually a wealth of evidence that Israeli forces are committing genocide. All of it was used and quoted in the ICJ. The war crimes and civilian targeting in the original tweet are clearly referencing a specific application which does display genocide. He didn't respond to that original tweet, and you could see why, right? The tweet makes his big epic dunk a moot point. Here you might say, well, no, he maybe just didn't see that second tweet. And it's like, maybe, but also, you know, it was tweeted a minute after. And the first thing you see when you click on a tweet is replies from the original author. I think the more likely explanation is just that it's easier to pick incomplete criticism to dunk on. It's just you want to win. You win. You win that point. You win that point in response. Congratulations. But you won in the most annoying and inconsequential way possible. One wonders how someone like this ends up getting divorced very publicly and then making hours and hours of content talking about his ex-wife. I mean, it's just, you know, normal stuff, cool stuff. Another response to that first tweet was someone saying, if Nazi Germany wanted to genocide all the Jews, then they would only exist in the history books, Destiny circa 1943. Again, he's just quoting the logic back. We did that earlier, you know? How does Destiny respond to this? Well, he does it by doing a sneaky little switcheroo. The Jewish population still hasn't recovered from the Holocaust, a genocide lasting a few years that's some 80 years old. Israel has been continually genociding Palestinians for decades, and yet their population continues to grow every single day. The first tweet stipulated total annihilation, remember? That was the definition he used, but when someone responds doing the same thing, he does a switcheroo. He backpedals from a population that only exists in the history books to a population that has not recovered in growth. That's not what you said, bro.
Normal stuff, cool stuff.
In the future, when the dust settles about what's going on right now, what's happening to Palestinians, insofar as it needs to settle, I think anyone paying attention, there's no dust. I do wonder what guys like this will be up to, you know? Like his grandkid, Beyonce Jr., comes up to him at the cabin, sits up on his knee and says, "Hey, Pup, where were you during the Palestinian genocide?" And he'll be like, "Well, kiddo, I was in my gamer chair trying to convince everybody that it wasn't happening." And then Beyonce Jr. will say, "Why'd you do that? What the fuck, man?" And he'll say, "Because I didn't want to be wrong." So, also it helped me pull 20 million views a month, so there's that. It'll be fine, though, you know, big fan base, following the pathway of warmongering liberalism. Every lib journalist that foamed at the mouth to invade Iraq, they're like tenured professors, and they work at the Washington Post and write op-eds for that War Crime College Institute place we talked about earlier. No, I'm not coming on your stream. I don't want to get destroyed in the marketplace of ideas, but also that's probably a good thing. The last guy I debated live on stream ended up having animated child porn on his computer. I don't think anyone wants to be exposed for that, so lose the battle, win the war, so they say. Anyways, see you guys. Have a good one. Bye.